Paulette of Soltar Solutions, and I am so excited to be bringing this information to you today. We are going to be talking about self-publishing, hybrid publishing, and traditional publishing. And I have the CEO of Greenleaf Book Group with me today, and she's going to help clear up all the confusion out there about this topic. So Tanya, this is Tanya Hall. Tanya, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here and hope to help some people today.
Well, I'm sure you're going to do that. So tell us, what's the difference between self-publishing, hybrid publishing, and traditional publishing?
Okay, well, a little bit of a loaded question because there are no real set definitions for really most of those things in our industry, but we'll use sort of the common understandings of what they mean. So self-publishing is one end of the spectrum, of course, and that would just be you, the author, serving as general contractor, if you will, and being in charge of getting the thing written, getting your design taken care of, the book cover, the interior, and then setting it up through any number of usually print on demand or ebook publishers where you're selling it yourself and usually just online. So you have all of the control. You're keeping a lot bigger piece on the royalty side. But typically on the self-publishing side of things, you also lose some of that distribution access because you're not affiliated with a publisher. And unfortunately, there are just so many books published every day that the retailers can't take on that much volume. On the other side, of course, we have traditional publishing where historically you've been paid in advance. Usually you have an agent who's out there selling your book on your behalf. You take an advance, which is sort of like the venture capital model I like to tell my business authors because they understand that, versus bootstrapping, which is the self-publishing side, of course. So you take your advance, you have a smaller royalty on the back end. If you earn out your advance, you have less creative control, but you're affiliated with an entity that has obviously nice brand cachet, has a lot of expertise in-house because most of them have been doing this forever. And it takes a little bit of the financial risk off the table for you if that's a concern. And then in the middle, there are hybrid models like Greenleaf Book Groups, where we take the best qualities of self-publishing, the best qualities of traditional publishing, and blend those together. And at the same time, it takes out the downfalls of each of those models. So what I mean by that is our model gives authors the creative control, the speed to market, and the larger royalty share that a self-publishing author would have, but at the same time, we are at our heart a distributor. So we have all of the access into Barnes & Noble, the airport stores, all of that good stuff that you typically would need a traditional publisher to reach. And so we bring that piece to the table as well as the expertise that comes from people who have been working in publishing for, in many cases, decades here at Greenleaf.
Wow, that's fascinating. So for a new author that's just starting out, what do you think they should be looking at in their publishing deal? Like, for instance, if they're going to go with a self-publisher or if they're thinking of a hybrid publisher, most of the time for most new authors, traditional publishing is out. That's not something that we can even, think about. But what should they be looking for? What are the questions that they should ask?
Sure, and you're right. Unfortunately, with traditional publishing, especially as that has become increasingly consolidated, it's quite difficult to get a deal for what I like to call a debut author, not a first-time author. So there's kind of 5 areas where I think an author needs to ask him or herself some questions to figure out priorities and goals and things like that. And conveniently, they spell out the word SCORE, and that's a nice tool to help me remember when I'm talking about this subject. So we'll go through them one by one. The first one is the S letter, speed to market. So, and these are not in order of priority. It'll be different for every author, but speed to market really just refers to how quickly your book's going to come out. If you're self-publishing and just putting something up on, CreateSpace or one of those tools, you can publish really quickly. Now, that's not always a good thing, and quite often I spend a lot of time talking people out of publishing really quickly because there are typically a lot of brand and platform building things that should be happening first. But speed to market is important if you're doing something that's tied to technology or maybe current events where you just can't wait the years that it takes to do something in a more traditional approach. But if you do have those years and all the other factors that kind of veer you towards traditional publishing are in line, then if speed to market is not a concern, you might find yourself more on the traditional or even hybrid end of the spectrum. Then would be creative control. That's the C in the SCORE. What we call that? That's not an anagram. There's a word for these where each letter stands for something, but my publishing colleagues are going to kill me. The C is creative control. And obviously in self-publishing, you have a lot of creative control. Obviously, that's not always a good thing, again, because unfortunately authors work in a little bit of a vacuum, and you will ask your friends and your colleagues and your family what they think of your cover and your blurbs and probably the work itself, and they will all tell you it's great. So sometimes it's a smart author who's savvy enough to step back and have some objectivity to say, I need some outside help to really help me understand, is this marketable? Am I putting my best face forward here? Because of course, all these things are a representation of your brand. It's very hard to remove once they're out there. So creative control sometimes is important for people who are using the book to promote a business, and maybe there's some brand messaging that needs to stay consistent within the book, or even a color palette that they want to maintain. If that kind of detail is super important, then that becomes a factor that might lean that author towards either self-publishing or a hybrid model that gives them more of that control, because on the traditional side of things, you will likely give quite a bit of that up. Then the O is ownership and rights. And this is really becoming increasingly important, and something that authors are very smart to be increasingly savvy about and sensitive to. So when we talk about ownership and rights, we're simply talking about your rights to sell the book. So when you get an advance with a traditional publisher, you are basically selling the right to sell the book for a term within a certain geographic area. And when you do that, there can be some broader implications if you've kind of built an empire around the content that's in that book. So for instance, if you are writing a book on leadership and you have aspirations to start doing seminars and workshops and workbooks and spin-off products, some of that can get tied up in those rights deals, and you may not have either the freedom or the financial gain that you would have if you had full ownership and control of those rights. So it's complicated. The digital side of things has made it increasingly complicated, because now you have terms like holding rights in perpetuity, because things never go out of print. And a lot of authors, therefore, are very sensitive to wanting to hold on to their rights. The models that allow you to do that are self-publishing. A lot of the hybrid models like Greenleaf's, our authors have always held all of their rights. And those are the two, actually. On the traditional side, you will certainly be giving up your rights in some way for some length of time. Then resources are important. Obviously, if you just don't have the money to put into hiring a cover designer and an interior designer, and then certainly in every publishing model, you've got to be able to put some resources behind publicity and getting the word out there. But if money is particularly tight, you may have your hand forced to go in more of a either traditional model where you're hoping to get an advance, particularly if you need to take time off of a quote unquote day job to do a lot of research and write out a book. Then you almost have to have an advance, right? So certainly resources play into that. And then also, if resources are tight and you see your market as being really, really niche, then self-publishing might really be the best bet. There's a great example out there of a book on how to become a pharmaceutical sales rep. And I always point to that book as an excellent example of something that is perfectly fine sitting within that self-publishing world, because it's not going to find a home in Barnes and Noble. It's got a very limited audience. Perhaps they need to update it from time to time with new training or whatever they put in there, but it sells very well, and it's just perfectly suited for e-publishing and self-publishing at that. Not a very expensive book to put out. So if you have the resources to actually make sure that you're getting a good cover design and interior, and then of course you want to hire a team to help you with all of that, then in that case you would be looking at probably more of a hybrid approach like Greenleaf's, where you're still having final say on all these various decisions, but you have a team of people that you're paying for that value, the knowledge that they have, and that expertise. And then finally, segueing right into the E, expertise. So self-publishing, you're working in a vacuum typically. There are a lot of great groups out there that can give people support and feedback and guidance. conferences as well, and then of course shows like yours, Lori. So the expertise piece is important when you realize that either you're too close to it to fairly judge it, or you're just out of your element. You know, most of us aren't gifted with such diverse talents, ranging from editorial to design to a brain for marketing and then sales savvy to get it into the door at the retail channels. So that's when the people who've been doing this forever really come in handy. A lot of folks have businesses that they're running or other things, family things to pertain to and or to deal with, and they don't necessarily want to devote the time to that huge learning curve. So if they're focused on some other best, highest use of their time and they need that team of experts, then either a hybrid model where they're basically paying for that expertise, like in Greenleaf's model, or the traditional model where you'll certainly have an editor assigned. That's changed a lot in the past years, as I know you know, Lori. You'll have some level of expertise available to you in the traditional model. But the thing to remember is in the self-publishing world, you are largely kind of on your own.
Yeah, very much on your own. And what it takes to market a book in this day and age is really intense. It is intense and extreme. And most people find it really difficult to do a great job at that and also have like a regular job to do that on their own. So they really need to have that expert help. So it's wonderful that you can offer that, you know, to them, because there's so many, I see these deals that come across my desk that people have signed, and the contracts really are not very favorable to the authors at all. So it's a good idea to, you know, go to somebody who already knows this and can really guide you along. So it's great that you're able to do that. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show, Tanya. And we're going to, you know, have you back on another time so we can talk more about this, because I really want people to have a much better understanding of exactly what the resources are out there and how they can utilize those resources. So thank you so much. You've been wonderful.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has. Visit our website, Greenleaf Book Group, if you need the information there, if you want to submit a book for us to consider, because we're always happy to give advice and help however we can.
Well, that's true. You have so much information on the website. I spent hours on there. I learned so much from it. So that's a very good point. So thank you so much, Tanya. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Laurie. Pleasure to be here.
So there you have it. That was really great education on what to look for and what you're up against as a first-time or debut author, as Tanya so eloquently put it. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you'll tune in again to Focus Forward.